Hello, my name is Walt Mussel. I'm an author in the Atlanta area. Welcome to part 3 of my presentation, The Path to Silence, Japan's Christian Century and Beyond. When we finished part 2, it was 1598. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the second of 3 men credited with unifying Japan in the late 16th and early 17th century, has just died. Hideyoshi's fondest wish was that his son would succeed him in ruling the country. However, at the time of his death, Hideyoshi's son Hideyori was only 5 years old. So Hideyoshi set up a council of 5 elders tasked with bringing up Hideyori until he might one day himself rule. The Jesuits welcomed Hideyoshi's death. In his latter years, he had been seen as unstable, maybe going slightly mad. The term used back then was possessed by the fox. He was given to uncontrolled fits of rage. His second invasion of Korea, when he had no new technology and no new ideas to support it after his failed first attempt, and then his execution of the 26 Christians in Nagasaki, were all seen as examples of this. The Jesuits saw that likely one of 2 men would be the next leader. The man on the left is Ishida Mitsunari. Mitsunari is Hideyoshi's finance guy. He has a stiff, unbending style, and he was known for irritating warlords. Despite this, he was devoted to Hideyoshi and would have done anything to see the success of the Toyotomi family. The man on the right is Tokugawa Ieyasu. Ieyasu was Hideyoshi's smartest and strongest warlord. At the same time, despite needing him, Hideyoshi didn't trust Ieyasu as far as he could throw him. One of the ways this comes out is in 1590. In 1590, Hideyoshi's forces defeat those of the Hojo clan. The Hojo clan is the pinkish area represented by the white arrow. And when this happens, Hideyoshi says to Ieyasu, "Leave your province. You can have the Hojo clan's place. It'll be a gift. It's bigger. You can make a huge deal of it." Now, Ieyasu was located where the green arrow was. By moving him to where the white arrow is, he was moving Ieyasu farther from Kyoto, the capital. He was also moving him away from his family base, which would have been intensely more loyal. Hideyoshi did give Ieyasu supposedly some advice. The Hojo had been headquartered in Odawara, but he suggested that Ieyasu should make his headquarters in Edo. Edo is the medieval name for Tokyo. And so Ieyasu honored this request to move and began building up Edo. Eventually, Ieyasu won out anyway. I have him listed as patient winner because patience was one of his hallmark qualities. Of the poem I mentioned in part 2, The Singing Bird and the 3 leaders who unified Japan, when the bird doesn't sing, Nobunaga says, "Kill it." When the bird doesn't sing, Hideyoshi says, "I'll make it sing." But for Ieyasu, when the bird doesn't sing, "I'll wait for it to sing." Ieyasu had hoped to succeed Nobunaga as Hideyoshi had, but at the time of Nobunaga's assassination, Ieyasu was in one place, his forces were in another, and it was impossible for him to get to his forces and challenge the traitor. But now he had his opportunity, and he made good use of it. He created conflict with the council and the Toyotomi loyalists and defeated them in battle in 1600. Mitsunari was arrested and later executed. Ieyasu passed this off as saying, "Oh, we're still taking care of Hideyori. I'm just in charge for now." But in 1603, he was named shogun, the title he had always sought. And then in 1605, he retired and passed the title of shogun onto his son, Hidetada. When this happened, people realized that the Tokugawa family was not going to relinquish the claim. By naming his son, he didn't mean he was stepping down, or he's stepping down in name only. He was still controlling things behind the scenes, but this would ensure his son's lineage. The Tokugawas and the forces of the supporters of Toyotomi would eventually fight again in 1614 and 1615, with the Tokugawa clan winning. Hideyori, by that time in his early 20s, would be forced to commit suicide. Ieyasu was always looking for knowledge, thirsting for knowledge of the outside world. One of the things he did was he decided to keep his relations with the Franciscans and the Jesuits. With the Franciscans, he invited a monk for an audience in 1599, requesting long-range shipbuilding technology from Spain. The Franciscans turned him down. He had requested it from the Jesuits as well prior. The Jesuits had also turned him down. The reason they wondered is that Ieyasu may have wanted more trade. At the same time, there was concern that he might be seeking more conquest. Still, Ieyasu maintained these relations, and with the Jesuits, he went as far as making João Rodrigues his advisor and commercial agent in 1601. So who is Rodrigues? Rodrigues was a gifted linguist, as I have above. He became the official translator in 1590, and he was eventually ordained in the 1590s and became curator of the mission in 1598. As curator, he dealt with the financial challenges of the mission. He was a typical Jesuit recruit. The Jesuits didn't have to go back to Portugal and say, recruit and come to Asia, we need you. Though they could ask existing Jesuits if they wanted to come to Asia. Instead, there were thousands of Portuguese in Asia already. Men who had come as cabin boys to captains, or servants to priests. Or, as in the case of Rodrigues, he left Portugal at either age 13 or age 14 and to seek his fortune. He was recruited by the Jesuits, and supposedly by the age of 19 he had joined. As a commercial agent, he began negotiating for Ieyasu with the Portuguese, negotiating bulk prices for silk from the Jesuit residents in Nagasaki. He was so good at this that he was even invited by Ieyasu to represent the Japanese government in trade disputes. This work allowed him to help fund the mission. It also allowed Rodriguez to arrange meetings between maybe Ieyasu and the bishop. However, one of the challenges with this, as I mentioned in the previous parts, operating in this way was a violation of canon law. But also, the Japanese in this time period have a saying: screens and merchants are crooked. And this method of operating for Rodriguez made him seem as much a merchant as he was a Jesuit. The Portuguese and Spanish and Rodriguez also had competition. In 1600, the Dutch ship Leaf Day reached Japan. On board was the Englishman William Adams. He was the pilot of the ship, and he is the basis for the novel Shogun. Adams, very smart, very well traveled, was received by Ieyasu, who questioned him at length about Europe and about Christianity. And this is when Ieyasu learned about Protestants and the differences that they had with the Catholics. Adams would learn Japanese and become another advisor to Ieyasu. He was also willing to provide Ieyasu with long-range ship technology. At the same time, the Dutch began pushing their claims for trade. They talked often that Catholics have an allegiance to Rome, and this would be a problem for the Japanese, and that they, if you trade with the Dutch, they would not proselytize. A major issue eventually arose for the Jesuits and the Portuguese. In 1608, a Japanese crew wintering in Macau got rowdy with the Chinese over the details of a spice purchase, and reportedly several Chinese were killed. The governor of Macau, which was the captain of the black ship, Captain Major Pessoa, mobilized the guard, and before the Jesuits brokered a truce, it's reported that 40 to 50 Japanese were likely killed. Now, Captain Major Pessoa would take the black ship and eventually go on to Japan, and so he was in the harbor in Nagasaki on the Madre de Deus when competing stories of the incident grew into a huge dispute. The Japanese ship that had lost its sailors had returned. They're providing one story. The Portuguese have another story. And eventually, Ieyasu would order surrender, or else all the Jesuits would be expelled and all the Portuguese in Nagasaki killed. In January of 1610, after 4 days of attacks by Japanese ships on the Madre de Deus, Captain Major Pessoa aimed the cannons at his own armory and blew the ship up, taking it down with all hands. This was a tremendous loss of life and also a tremendous loss of money. The Dutch had successfully raided the black ships in a couple of the prior years, so this particular black ship was loaded. And so the Portuguese lost a huge amount of money in addition to the sailors. A few notes about this incident. One, if you try looking it up on your own, Macau could be spelled differently. It could be spelled Macau. and the Madre de Dios may have another name. The stories are different on different spots. However, I've chosen these because those are what most of my sources say. But another thing the history books mention is that often mentions that in 1610, all the missionaries were expelled. This is incorrect. They were ordered by Ieyasu, but Ieyasu rescinded the order. However, one missionary did end up being expelled, Rodriguez. And with Rodriguez gone, William Adams gained a better position with Ieyasu. Within the first couple of years, Bishop Sakaria was telling his superiors, "Oh, things are great now. Rodriguez is gone, and everything is back to normal." He was off. In 1612, the Tokugawa government outlawed Christianity in the Edo district and surrounding area. And by 1614, Ieyasu ordered all missionaries to leave, as it was translated, the country of the gods and the Buddha. The missionaries were ordered to Nagasaki to await transport. And by November, most of them were gone either to Manila or Macau, and the churches in Nagasaki were destroyed. About 50 plus missionaries went into hiding, desperate to support the Christian population of Japan at the time, which numbered over 300,000. But there was one peculiar incident going on as this was starting. Date Masamune is one of my favorite samurai, and he controlled an area in the northern part of the main island of Honshu. Masamune was known for his ferocity. He always wore an eye patch. As a child, he had lost sight in one eye, believed due to smallpox. And as an adult, whether true or not, he didn't argue it. He basically ripped out his own eye. But Masamune made arrangements with a Franciscan monk that had been expelled from Edo to send a delegation to Spain to press for trade. The delegation left in October 1613. They eventually reached New Spain, and many of the delegation were baptized in Mexico City. They eventually reached Spain, and the head of the delegation was baptized in Madrid. And so while this is going on, the delegation is being baptized. They're meeting the King of Spain. They're meeting the Pope. At the same time, back in Japan, the Nagasaki churches were destroyed, and the churches in Kyoto were also destroyed. The delegation would return in 1620 to Japan, though some of them did stay in Spain, and their descendants still live there to this day. The men who returned found a very different Japan, one that was not welcoming foreign trade as much, and one that was not welcoming Christianity. If you talk about this, if you see this in the history books, some history books will say this was the first visit by the Japanese to Europe. This is incorrect. In the 1580s, the father visitor from Goa arranged for 4 teenage samurai to visit Europe and return. This was an effort to introduce Japan to the Europeans, an effort to get money and donations for the efforts in Asia. If you're interested, Amazon Prime has a series called Magi, M-A-G-I, The Tensho Boys Embassy, which is a few historical uh, issues, but overall a good series. Second, people will say that this was the first official government visit between Japan and a European country, in this case Spain. This is debatable. Masamune is a governor, and so he's sending a delegation to meet with Spain, and so from that standpoint it is. But this was not something sanctioned by the Tokugawas. However, Masamune is smart, and so is Ieyasu. Likely, Masamune had somehow conveyed, it is speculated that he conveyed and got approval, at least tacit approval, to do this. But it's hard to know, as Ieyasu died before the men returned. Masamune spent the rest of his life under a cloud of suspicion, people thinking he was disloyal to the Tokugawas. That was not the case. But he did run a poor district, and he saw trade as an opportunity to help his people, including those closest to him. If the rumors are to be believed, both Masamune's wife and daughter were Christians. There were some subsequent martyrdoms that I'll mention. In October of 1619, 52 Christians were burned on the Kamo River in Kyoto, including children as young as 5. My understanding when I've read about burning at the stake is that the people actually die of asphyxiation before they die of being burnt. However, it had rained the night before, the wood was wet, and so this was a much longer process for these people. They would sing the Te Deum Laudamus, and they were so ardent that the crowd watching began singing it with them as well. And that's when the Japanese government realized they had a problem. It's one thing to kill the missionaries and to kill the Christians, and they continued to do that. But martyrdom seemed to make Christians stronger. So they began seeking apostasy. And by apostasy, I mean getting someone to renounce their faith. Some examples: in 1622, 55 Christians were martyred at Nagasaki, and this is when Catholicism was officially outlawed. 1623, Franciscans and other Christians martyred in Edo. 1626, Jesuits and other Christians martyred in Nagasaki. The Japanese continued to look at ways to get people to either announce their Christianity or apostatize from it. For the general population, they developed a psychological test known as the Fumie. And for torture, they developed what was known as the pit. Thank you for watching. Again, if you want to check out that Amazon Prime thing, it's Magi, the Tensho Boys Embassy. I do this presentation for free, mostly to churches. Just let me know. Please contact me at my website, www.waltmuscle.com. Please like this video and follow me on YouTube, and you'll be notified of when part 4, which should be the final part,